President Obama speaking in Orlando moments ago alongside Vice President Biden after meeting with families of victims and survivors of Sunday's terror attack. He offered many consoling words, and we also heard him get a little bit political once again, taking some veiled shots at Republicans over the massacre. For those of you who are just joining us that didn't get a chance to see the president's remarks, I'll read you this from those remarks, and we'll go to Greg for his reaction to some of the rest of the speech. He said that given the last two terror attacks were homegrown, we are going to have to do more to prevent these events. Today, once again, too many times before, I held grieving family members. They asked, why does this keep happening? They pleaded, we do more to stop the carnage. They don't care about politics, and neither do I. And I believe that he believes that, Greg, but what you heard, I think, was a little bit more political than you expected.
I thought it was insulting. I really did. It's pathological to deny the terror and instead focus on the instrument of terror, and it allows you to connect it to a greater context of other crime rather than focusing like a laser on Islamism. If he needs to see it through the prism of guns, and that gets him to the table to fight terror, fine. But do not denigrate people who actually believe and know that the #1 threat is Islamism. He said it's not common sense to consider defending yourself in an area like a club. Only 1% of the mass shootings that take place happen where you can defend yourself. The rest of them are in gun-free zones. That's common sense, Mr. President. It took 3 hours for that standoff to end in Orlando. It took 3 hours, and the reason was it took 3 hours to get the second gun there. So if that time gets shrunk, how do you shrink it? By having people defend themselves. I am willing to compromise, destroy ISIS, and prevent terrorists from getting guns. But his unbending mind, his unwillingness to see what the threat is and to spread it thin and to focus it politically, and then he's basically questioning our morality. He's questioning our morality, that if we were not on his side, we're insulting these victims, and that's disgusting. It's just absolutely disgusting, and I expect more from him. And I've defended him. It bugs me.
One of the things, Eric, that he also said, he said that Mateen was a single deranged person, as if he was not connected to terrorism. He also said, this is Charles Cook from National Review tweeted that, he said that if you don't, basically it was along the lines of, if you don't think that these guns need to be banned, then you need to talk to some of these family members. And Charles Cook writing that that was beneath contempt and emotional blackmail, not an argument.
So yesterday we talked about this a little bit. We knew he was going to come, and we didn't see the text of the speech yet. And
you called it.
Yeah, I basically asked, can you just you represent all of us? Right. You represent those on the right and those on the left. We know where you are politically. Can you just take an hour, half hour, or 20-minute speech and give condolences to the family members and the first responders and leave the politics out? He didn't do much of that. He did some of the condolences with the family members, and then he got very political. There was a lot of politics in it. Greg points out the two lines together that he said, that I'm sitting in the green room listening, and my head was exploding. He said, although the motives may have been different in this act, the instruments are the same. That's code for, this wasn't terror, this wasn't a terror plot, this wasn't like the others, it's all about the guns. Now, the problem is, Mr. President, the motives were the same. This guy, Mateen, had the same motives as the Tsarnaev brothers, as Farouk in San Bernardino, as Nidal Hassan in Fort Hood. It was all radical jihad. It wasn't a mass murder. Yeah, sure, Lanza up in Connecticut was a mass murder, and in Colorado was a mass murder. I get that. There are those. But there are also terrorist events. This was a terrorist event. President Obama ended with a heartfelt outreach to the gay community, and I think that was fine, except for the fact that the progressive left is the single biggest threat to the LGBT community because of this, and we all know that under Sharia law, there is no room to be gay. It's just, if you're gay, you either have to become not gay or die.
Yeah. Well, and this is a president who has, as he said, he's had to do a lot more of this than he would have wanted. And so there's the homegrown terror attacks. There's also Sandy Hook and others. Plus, not to mention what's going on even in Chicago, those we've talked about on this show, and others have as well. He says that tomorrow he's glad that the Senate is going to take up this, the gun issue. That might be fine, but what about the ISIS issue? I mean, do you expect to see any changes on that front?
I would hope that the Congress would finally, you know, find the heart to say that we need to go to war with ISIS. But they refuse to vote ever on an authorization for use of military force. They back away from it every time. And I want
to comment on that when you're finished.
Sure. And I think it is common sense, Greg, that someone who has lived through Newtown, Columbine, Charleston would say, oh, so if we give terrorists easy access to guns, people with either unstable minds or minds that have been infected by the terrorist disease, and say, oh, you can have easy access to guns, that is on us as American people.
That's a conversation for another time.
No,
this is about terror in Orlando.
That is not true.
Attaching it to everything else, it dilutes our will.
Oh, yeah, well, tell that to Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is saying the same thing to the NRA, that it's time to do something about easy access to guns for terrorists.
I'm against easy access to guns
to
terrorists, but that's not what this is about. This is about diversion and deflection.
Well, if this guy was, as you describe him, somehow linked into Al Qaeda, beyond the social media,
he wasn't on the terrorist watch list.
Then what?
He wasn't on the terrorist watch list.
He had been investigated by the FBI for terrorist connections.
But Juan, when he bought those guns, he wasn't on any terrorist watch list.
Correct. But if the FBI had the ability to say
what would the passing law that you recommend
correct this situation?
It wouldn't have helped Orlando.
It would have helped, because what you would have had was the FBI have the ability, even if he wasn't on the watch list, to say, this is someone we're probing.
Well, you're talking something different now. Now you're saying
that is
take
quite
someone
similar.
who's ever been on the watch list and never let him get a gun.
This is someone that they were looking at, and I think what everyone, including the U.S. Senate, needs to do
from the watch list, Juan. He walked into a gun shop. He was not on the watch list, therefore purchased a gun or several guns.
That right now, we've heard conversations, we were talking about this yesterday, that if someone who has been investigated attempts to buy the gun, that the authorities can be alerted. What you're going to see in the U.S. Senate, thank goodness for the Democrats filibustering, is one, discussion about people like this getting guns, but secondly, an opportunity to expand background checks. That's good stuff.
But this still isn't dealing with the root of the problem, because we have a president who is unwilling and dangerously reckless with our national security because he's afraid of words and he will not identify the problem. Instead, he wants to divert and talk about gun control. But as we just pointed out, there isn't anything that could have been on books that would have prevented him from getting these weapons, or, by the way, obtaining them through illegal means. What we know is he obtained the weapons legally. What we know is this is somebody that was plotting and planning this for a very long time. He cased multiple locations. He looked for the most target-rich, soft environment, and that's what he chose.
And by the way,
it's not some like deranged, crazy person. Evil? Yes. ISIS-inspired? Yes. Islamist terrorists? Yes.
Yeah, and also, if he wants to talk about the other aspects of gun violence or the other incidents, the Aurora guy shot for a specific theater that was gun-free. Right. There was a much closer one that didn't have that rule, so maybe he should admit that.
We're going to have much more to come. I am just going to take a moment, though, to talk about this AUMF thing. If I can see the point to President Obama that him saying the magic words of radical Islam is not going to immediately change the war on terror, then the left has to concede the point that if the Congress were to pass a specific authorization, war authorization against ISIS, isn't going to change a thing. Those are magic words if the policies aren't going to change. And the left and the White House have not said that there would be something that they want to do to go after ISIS that they are prevented from doing right now under the current AUMF that exists at this moment.
Remember that this happened because the president wanted strikes against the Syrian government, and guess what? The Congress wouldn't go along. And guess what? It comes down to a matter of political will, Dana, as to whether or not you are saying we should put additional troops, put additional monies into fighting ISIS at this point. And the Congress says, oh, we don't want our fingerprints on it because war is not popular. The political will is absent.
We don't have enough time to go through all of that. I think we could have a really good discussion on it, but we got to go.